What the hell do I know? I'm just JB, middle-aged dad with ADD. Candid combos, jokes so lame, jabronis pulling a poker face. Just a couple of dudes with ADD. What the hell do I know? With JB.
Chill. I was gonna do it.
You almost forgot. It's like, what? Are you too busy to be here? Because our audience is here.
I'm looking at the floors,
and I'm thankful for it. Listen, if Juice isn't interested in you, I am, and I'm so thankful that you watch. I'm excited about this episode because my next guest. My next guest.
Man, they just keep getting better.
I mean,
not better.
I mean, we kind of. I feel like we've hit celebrity status.
Are we?
I mean, that's how good
it's like
it
Wayne's
feels.
World.
And so I'm so excited. But before I introduce my next guest, I want to again thank you for liking, subscribing, following along. We hope you get something good out of it. I always say that it's good to put good out in the world, and that's how I feel about it. But again, thanks so much for being a part of What the Hell Do I Know and being an honorary jabroni. But welcome to the Floors.com studio. Floors is your one-stop shop for your next flooring or wall covering remodel or new build. So make sure you tell them the jabronis sent you. They will take care of you. We just got a code too. What's the code, Juice?
What is it, Juice?
It's if you have a government ID. I know it's government ID.
First responders.
It's 5% off.
I don't know if there's a code. It says
It's not a code.
5% off military discount to current and former U.S. military spouses and dependents, first responders, including law enforcement, fire, EMS, as well as federal, state, and local government employees.
But that's huge. And by the way, they're
That's
shipping across the continental United States. So, I mean, if you want floors, you go on there, you can call them up, they'll walk you through it. They've got designers that will help. They really care. And if you're a first responder, everybody else at Juice Red, you get 5%. Yeah. You put in your government ID, and you're done. They use, you just put in your ID, they know it, and it's done, and you get 5%, which is a huge savings. I mean, especially when you're ordering, like, you know, I feel like Brandy put 14, you try to tell us she put 14,000 square feet of floors in.
I had 50,000 square feet. I put down 14,000 LVP.
But every time you say it, you had 50,000 square feet. Somebody else did it.
I ain't putting down 14,000 square feet.
You were not on your hands and knees doing this, bro.
No, I paid for 14,000 square feet.
But anyway, floors.com, FLOOR.com. So check them out. But now I get to introduce to you what I like to call, because I don't know if you guys know this, the most powerful person in our county.
At least in this room.
Don't believe the hype.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype.
We didn't pat him down to see if he was carrying it.
I'll make that easy for you. I am.
I hope he is.
Always.
But our sheriff of Walton County, our sheriff, we all live in Walton County. Our sheriff, Michael Adkinson. So thank you so much
for
being
having
here.
us, man. It's good to be here. You know what the best description of being sheriff is?
What's that?
I spent all day apologizing for things I knew nothing about and had absolutely nothing to do with it. So there's a good predecessor to being sheriff right there.
Right.
You start learning to go, okay, hey, listen, I'm sorry. What do we do?
I'm sorry.
No, but I learned somewhere, is like a government class or something like this, that I learned that the sheriff, I assume it's across our country, but is kind of the most powerful person in the county, in part because you're an elected official. So I guess like a chief of police reports to maybe a commissioner or mayor.
Sure.
But you're an elected official with jailing powers.
Fundamentally different. So, this is the way I would tell people. It is the only level of policing in this country that the citizens have a direct say in. So let me say that to you again.
Yeah.
So think of it this way. If you're in Monroe County, Florida, or you're in Escambia County, so that's both ends of the state of Florida, right? And you want to say in how things are being done, right? You have a direct say, right? So you can be, listen, the parameters of you're going to follow the law are the same everywhere, right? But kind of the tenor or the style or the culture is entirely up to the sheriff, and so that means it's directly up to people.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, in Florida specifically, the sheriff's the chief law enforcement officer in any county in the state of Florida. And so I don't work for the Highway Patrol, or I don't work for the governor or the Attorney General. I work for you. Literally that simple.
That's great.
And so what you tell me the priority is what becomes our priority. So if you say, Juice, I don't, my priority is traffic.
Right.
Whatever that is. I mean, everybody has different priorities.
Right.
But let's just say I lost my mind and started every day doing something crazy involving traffic.
Yeah.
You can say, well, you know what? I want a new sheriff. I don't like the way this is done. And I think that's the way it should be.
Well, I enjoy the fact that we live in a country that we can elect people and elect our officials and kind of a majority rule sort of the deal. And what works, because you're right, that's the community you want to live in. I mean, and if you don't like it, then go to another community or pull people together and say, hey, look, we'd like something different. That's right.
So there's a really smart man, Dr. W. Edwards Deming, if you guys are familiar with him. He came up with the Toyota production system. He was the guy that kind of designed that after World War II. But he had an expression which I love, which is a good system will beat a bad person every time.
Oh, right? Wow. What a great statement. So, that's brilliant.
So, and he was an absolutely brilliant man. What I like about it is if you don't like the way we're doing this, you can change it. You know, so it's never the system that in a situation like this is the problem. It's how you apply to the system, and what I mean the system of policing. And so let me tell you a philosophical difference, because I think I was telling Juice a little earlier, and I think I said to you as well.
Right.
I spent a lot of years working for a large police department, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek. I'm joking, but there's a little truth to it, which is the difference between a good police officer and a good deputy sheriff, philosophically. A good police officer will tell you about solving crime, and a good deputy sheriff should solve problems. And in their lives, the crux of a philosophical difference, right? Where a police chief has to work for an assistant city manager or a city manager or a city councilor mayor.
Right.
The difference is I work for you.
That is the difference.
It is fundamentally, basically different. And I've done both. I've been a chief of police and I've been a sheriff, and I'm not trading positions again. Because when you have a city manager call you and go, look, I think you need to do X, Y, Z or two city council, that's not the way we do business. So it is different.
Now, let this guy go or whatever,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm sure there's people that wonder that. I'm so glad we actually talked about this, because I'm sure there's people that wonder, well, our commissioners probably made a phone call, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not really how it works.
No, it doesn't work like it doesn't work like that at all. And I'll tell you what's funny is when I worked for a police department, I used to say, I'll never work for a sheriff. It's too political. He has to be elected. She has to be. So I actually had the other view. I said, it's so political, I would never work for him. It's an order of magnitude less political in regard to people having influence like that. It just doesn't work like that, because if you call me and you say, I want you to let my buddy go or whatever, bullet for you. Okay. Good for you. That's not the way this works. The governor calls me tomorrow, and I'll tell him real quick, I don't work for you.
That's right.
You know, and
that's right.
So it really is. It is less political. I know that sounds crazy.
No. Now that you've explained it so well, I totally I understand what you're saying. You are independent, and you work for. And when you run, you don't actually put down. The sheriff doesn't really run under like a Republican or Democrat either, or do they do that?
They do here, although just pragmatically in a county like Walton County, there hasn't been a Democratic candidate elected since 1997.
It's pretty red.
No, Brandon rinsed all of them. He had the Democratic National Convention at his village.
I would prefer to run nonpartisan. I think it should be nonpartisan.
Yeah, for sure.
But in a county like this, it really doesn't.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Because even your Democrats are going to be, in this county, are going to be registered Republican for the most part. That's
much.
not even the second largest party. It's not even Democratic Party in this county.
No?
Not even close. It's independents. Or
independents.
No party affiliation.
That would make a lot of sense.
But I will say this, for your public and for the people that listen locally, one of the things that happens is people do not understand basic civics, and they don't understand that in a county like Walton County, the elections are over in the primaries.
Yeah.
Because no Democrat wins at the general election.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
all of the independents do not get to vote.
Right.
It's over before they vote.
That's right.
The elections are way over.
Yeah.
And I've told people that for years and years, and they don't seem to. Well, I'm going to vote X. No, you're actually not.
You're not.
Really over.
You're not voting in the primaries
if you're not
because you're independent.
Because you're independent. Yeah.
That's right.
And Florida, I disagree with the legislature on this, but I think it should be. I think for the fairness of the voter, what I would say is, everybody should run in the primary, and the top two should go to the November election. That's the way I would do it.
Too.
But the parties are never going to allow that.
Well,
no, that's
independence
right.
voting would also, I feel like, work because they're independent. But
well, you also, I always find Americans in general tend to, and we've talked about this, that politically, I think, people are much closer to the center.
Yeah.
It's just our loudest.
I used to think that.
Did you?
I used to think that.
Yeah.
Now I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm really concerned.
I tend to agree, and I don't want to get off into too far of a tangent politically.
The loudest mouth.
Well, I say it all the time. Our loudest mouths are the worst mouths. And I had a really good friend of mine. Shout out Mike Vigil of Allen Vigil Ford. If you're in South Atlanta, you got to go see Allen Vigil Ford. They will take care of you. I love those guys, but not 100%. Hey, just tell them JB sent you. But Alan's a really good friend of mine, and we were in like this breakfast deal at a business meeting, and when I was living in Atlanta, and he told me, he said, "Hey, the loudest voices in the car world are your worst car dealers." And I thought, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, look at a Ford commercial, Mercedes commercial. It's very nice. It's very clean. It's all of these things. He said, but then, the ones with the guy that's, the air guy floating around, come down here and buy a car. He's that's the one you don't want to buy a car from. And sometimes I feel that's the way in politics sometimes, right?
I think it's true. But unfortunately, we all say that. But at the same time, that's what gets people's attention. If you look who's voting, I wish it was different.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
There's a phrase in Latin. It's res ipsa loquitur, and it means the thing speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. We say we don't like these things, and yet we engage in them.
We're the algorithm.
We're the algorithm.
We're the algorithm. I say that all the time, folks. We the algorithm. What you see is what you get.
What you put into it, it's coming back at you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of wild at how social media has changed how we interact with each other. Yeah. And it's made us at each other more than
we've talked about this on several episodes where it is, when I say you're the algorithm, the problem is we very well may be on the biggest generational, the bias, confirmation bias kind of zone.
Listen. Have you ever heard of there's a phrase called Gell-Mann amnesia. It's GELL-MANN, Gell-Mann amnesia. And it was actually coined by Michael Crichton, the guy that wrote Jurassic Park. And a bunch of By the way, he was a doctor. If you didn't know that,
I did not know that
he was a doctor. But Gell-Mann amnesia really means this. I'm going to summarize it. But if you ever read an article in a magazine or newspaper or whatever, back when people read those, and you said, "Wow, that article is something you know something about," and you go, "Man, they're absolutely wrong. They're full of it. This is wrong. It's absolutely not true. They got one fact and you read it and go, this is so crazy." Yeah. And then the next week you read the same newspaper and go, "Wow, I didn't know this about this subject. That's absolutely true." So you forget that you knew they were fundamentally wrong, but you accept it's absolutely true in the other,
because you just don't know that much about
it. It fits a narrative, and there's a thing called confirmation bias, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think we struggle against, and I see this even in things like local development, and local politics or state politics.
Sure.
I watch it at the county level where maybe the same 6 people come to every board meeting, and they have an opinion.
Gosh,
so here's Mike's rule of politics. And this,
I love it.
Yeah, here it is. Mike's rule. If you come to more than one county commission a year, for which you don't have something on the agenda, and speak on every subject, there's a 99% chance you're a nut.
You need some attention. You're always screaming for attention.
Screaming for attention.
Yeah, I'm not listening to that. I'm not virtue signaling. And it just gets to the point that, and you can always tell because they stand up and go, "We the people."
We the people.
It's literally every time. You're not listening to us, the constituents. Well, I'm not listening to the people, or I'm not listening to you. Let's be clear about something here.
Because if it was such a big issue,
there would be other people there.
It'd be filled up here. It'd be filled
and it's
up.
Kind of the kid that cried wolf so many times is like, what? I don't know. What, you're just rambling so many times. What do you really care about?
Well, they do have an outsized influence, because what happens is, in fairness to the men and women that run for a county commission, really a sheriff has a better deal, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Because I deal with single issue, which is public safety.
Right.
I deal with something we can at least fundamentally agree this.
Right.
When you don't do what I want to do, if you're on the county commission, you're corrupt.
Yeah.
If I didn't give, you didn't get it. You didn't get it. And so it's. I
didn't get my
sympathetic
zoning or whatever.
Whatever. So I'm actually sympathetic to them.
Yeah.
But it's tough because they take such a beating, and you see that, and so it drives elected officials to say things that I just don't think. For example, I have very strongly held personal religious beliefs, right? And they are mine.
Yes.
And how I demonstrate or how I live my life is my responsibility. That's fundamental to me. But I've always questioned when you see an elected official and they send something out. Let's just say you're running for something completely unrelated, like a property appraiser or whatever it is, and your first thing is, I'm pro Second Amendment, I'm pro life, I'm pro fighting terrorism. Yeah, all that's great. What does that have to do with being a property appraiser? Right.
Exactly.
But confirmation bias, me as a believer going, okay, well, these are important things to me. So that's who I. That doesn't mean that you are qualified to be the property appraiser.
Right.
And it's a tough
great point.
You have to be willing to say that.
Yeah.
And we just don't do it.
Like half the people that run in politics now have no background or no knowledge of
Democrat or Republican. I see it day in, day out, and I go, wow, just wow. And we see it, and we all struggle with it.
Yeah.
And I think in a county like Walton County, so we're always in the top 10 fastest growing, 15 fastest growing counties of the country, percentage wise. And I think we could all agree traffic is a major problem here.
Yes. I was saying something about that earlier.
Yeah. So if you think about it, you have one north and south road, which is 331.
And one west.
And one east and west.
One east and west, right? Yeah. So guess what? Shockingly, traffic is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't want to spend money to build roads, or we don't want it for environment, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we need people to come here and spend for businesses. So, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today.
Yeah.
Right? You got to build roads. You got to do some of these things.
They got to be done.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's got to be done.
There's never a good time to start.
Yeah.
You just got to do it.
I want to dive into all that. Man, we've gone down like a real political side. I love it. And quite frankly,
kind of our guy.
I didn't realize how well read you are.
Yeah.
That is,
we could go so many tangents.
Dropping some knowledge. My good friend Bradley told me, he said, you haven't sat down with Sheriff. He said he knows his stuff. He said he knows his stuff.
We got to get smarter around here.
Well, you know what that is? So unfortunately, this is, here's the thing. My mother was a fundamental believer in a classical education.
Okay.
And so if you were going to be if you grew up in my home, you were going to read.
Yeah.
And you didn't necessarily get the option of what you were going to read. You were going to learn to read, and you were going to read what now are, kind of classics that people don't read anymore. So I still think that that's important. I think it matters. I think critical thinking is a singularly most important skill that somebody can have in life.
100%. Self-awareness is
emotional self.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Yo. True North Pest Control. They are all over Central Florida, Georgia, and they just moved here to the Emerald Coast. I just switched my service over to them. You got to check them out. Tell them JB sent you. They'll take care of you. We are a bug-free podcast because of them. True North Pest Control. Now back to the show.
Well, before we dive too much further, it is now time to play What the Hell Do I Know with Sheriff Michael Adkinson. 7 questions.
Okay, come on.
Rapid succession. You can pass if you want. There's no gotcha questions. We've got a clock on, and here we go. Number 1, what is your dream car?
1970 Ford F-100 or F-250, avocado green.
Bam!
I love you had the color name.
I don't even know if I can search that.
So Sheriff Aiden and I, we talk about this all the time in Oak County.
I love this. Yeah. Number 2, if you could only drink coffee or tea for the rest of your life, which one would it be? Okay. Number 3, what part of a roller coaster do you like to ride on? Is it in the front, middle, or back?
No. I'm terrified.
Done. Not any of them. No. That's great. Number 4, favorite restaurant here on the Emerald Coast. That might get you in trouble. You might have to pass. I don't know. I didn't think about that.
That's a hard pass. I love so many places.
I know.
Here.
All right, so we're going to pass there. Yeah. Number 5, what time do you get up every morning?
5:30.
5:30. All right. Number 6, do you like summer or winter?
Summer.
Perfect. Number 7, if you were given one wish to have, what would it be?
The well-being of my children.
Oh, that's perfect. But the correct answer is
infinite
wishes. Then it's the well-being of your children. So you did a great job.
Let me say this. You know why I didn't say ultimate wishes? So you
kill the clock.
Oh, we good?
Yeah, we're good. That was 7. Yeah.
So you know why I didn't say the ultimate wishes?
Yeah.
So this is a messed up version of Christianity right here, which is I believe. I know you're not supposed to believe in karma.
Right.
But if you,
karma's real.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I don't want to relive my life because I'm like, I shouldn't wish for that. That kind of stuff. So
right. No, I get. We do that. That question will appear in this game from time to time. Nobody said infinite. Nobody said infinite wishes. Because that's where I always like,
I get greedy.
It's infinite wishes.
Yeah. I'm afraid I'm greedy, man. I'm afraid I'm greedy.
Oh, It would be the worst. I always think about, we were just talking about this, not on the pod, but just Brandon and I together. If you remember that show, Bruce Almighty or whatever it was? And he gave, and he was God, and so he went on his email and he just hit yes to everything. And it was like 1 billion people won the lottery.
Everybody won the lottery.
They got like a nickel.
So absolutely. Absolute power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We say that all the time in my house. That is for sure. But again, before we dive into it, I do want to just take, if you don't mind, and I'm sure you don't mind, but I do want to take a moment before we dive into more questions. I really like how we got into it, but we had a major tragedy, and in fact, we've been trying to schedule you on the show for a minute. We went back on some dates. We had to not have. We had to cancel the podcast we had scheduled because this tragedy came, and we all here were praying for we continue to pray for your organization. But we definitely want to, before we get started, we want to take a moment of silence for Deputy William May, whose end of watch, and we're going to flash his picture up on the pod for the video, but whose end of watch came April 2nd, 2025, as he was actively protecting and serving our community. And, man, the story's terrible. You can read up about it. We don't have to relive it, but I just want to take a moment of silence for a second here on this show for Deputy William May. Okay. That's powerful.
Silence is always powerful.
Silence is always powerful.
Amen.
You kind of go into some prayer with it, and you go into some thoughts with it, and I know that affected your organization greatly. I was, of course, also appreciated to seeing how well the community turned out.
That motorcade
was amazing.
I was standing down at Applebee's watching it come down the hill.
The stories that have been told, the things I've read have been told of that deputy and his family. So I know he's going to continue to have an impact in your department probably for a long time.
And his father had Will's dad retired. So Walton County the sheriff's office here is a little bit different in that we are also fire rescue. So we're fire and EMS north of the Chattahoochee Bay.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And we have one of the largest fire departments in this part of the state of Florida. So,
wow.
But his dad had retired as an assistant chief for us, a battalion chief. And that it touches home even more so in that Will's dad, spent a career at Walton County Fire Rescue in the sheriff's office, and so there, a life dedicated to public service. And I think one of the things that I try to get across about this, and I said this at his funeral, you don't have to make more of Will in death than he was in life. And I think that's always a little bit of a mistake.
Sure.
Because the reality of it is I judge a man by, there's an expression we always say, ethics is what you do when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
Right? I like that, but here's a better version of that to me, which is integrity is what you do when everybody's looking, when it matters. And so that, to me, was Will's defining moment of measurement, in that when it mattered, he answered that call. And there's no more. And I tell men and women, they start all the time, the price for this business can be blood. And people listen because they watch cop shows. A little interesting study, a Pew Research study from a few years ago, they asked people about policing in general. And almost 90% of the public surveyed said they understood the job. Think about that for a second. Tell me another job where not the job. They felt they had a full understanding of the job. Well, they don't.
No.
Right. And certainly when it comes time to pay that price, that's it's a hard thing at multiple levels. And I think it's important. We have lost deputies over this incident. We will lose staff over this. And there's no shame in that. For some people, this is then they need to do something else. Right. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
No, it hit them that hard, huh? They just.
Well, it's a pretty common thing for for people to leave. Yeah, for sure. But it's not real to you when you're 27 years old or 30 years old, or maybe you come on, your wife says, or your husband says, I don't want you doing this anymore.
Yeah.
You got a kid at home.
Right.
Honey, you're a deputy sheriff.
Right.
Why do you don't need to do this?
Yeah.
Right.
We don't need to do this. And so, people don't think about that.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
And that's, listen, for me, and I've been doing this 32 years, we always talk about events like Will's, which is the most dramatic that people see. Here's what I see wears people down in my profession that nobody ever talks about, which is when you stand at a door at 2 o'clock in the morning, knock, 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 knock. Somebody comes to the door and you go, Mr. Johnson, I regret to inform you that your daughter's not coming home.
I couldn't do it.
So,
could not do it.
But the problem is you got to do it because that's the business we're in.
But I could not do that business.
But I tell you, and so that's not something you see, right? But it's something that's done every day. I don't have enough fingers and toes for the times I've done that. So those are the kind of things that I think wear these men and women down more than you can possibly realize.
Yeah.
A day in and day out. I know you said you had Julie Porterfield on here. I love Julie. I consider her a great friend.
She does a great
job.
job,
She does
too.
God's work. She is a wonderful, wonderful human being. She's done really amazing stuff. But we always used to talk about this when a deputy or an investigator, police or whatever, goes to interview these children and deal with these things. This is day in, day out. And I will routinely, I'll say something like that. Somebody go, well, don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear it. Well, first of all, I wasn't going to tell you about it. So that's A.
Yeah.
But think about fundamentally what you're saying. You can't even hear the thought of that.
Yeah.
You can't bear the thought of me accidentally telling you something.
Right.
No.
And then everybody else is living with it. Dealing with it day in and out. So, those are the kind of things that I think I know people don't understand.
Yeah.
From that point. And so I just think when in a case like Will's where there was absolutely nothing he could have done differently.
Right.
32 years I'm doing this, and I'm telling you, you could not have done it any better than he did it, and it wasn't his day. And that's the reality of the business we are in.
A terrible tragedy I just remember it stopped me in my tracks when I
call
saw
it what it is. It's a murder.
Murder.
It is.
Yeah,
It's a
100%
small
it is.
community.
The murder.
It was senseless. It sounds
tight
senseless.
It doesn't even make sense.
And your press conference right after it, I remember you saying something of that.
Yeah, he said
There was like this. There's no way to
I can't tell you we're going to learn something from it. I can't tell you we're going to handle something different because they're not.
Right.
In some ways, it would be easier, I think, for even the public to say, well, you didn't do X. You didn't do Y. Or you train, if you'd have trained more. There's no...
It sounds like his training kicked in because the threat was stopped.
The threat was stopped. So he put 6 rounds on target after being mortally wounded.
Wow.
It's a phenomenon. From holster. It is fun. From holster.
With a pistol.
Wow.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
How's that?
It's unbelievable.
That's unbelievable.
Your training just kicks in. You hear that in the military. You hear, trust your training,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How often do you all train? I mean, every day is kind of a...
So here is kind of the balance, and I always have to always kind of give this caveat.
Right.
Because we'll say all the time, somebody says, well, you need combat vets or you need these military guys. Well, yes and no.
Right.
Because we're in a business where you don't want a deputy sheriff walking around with their hand on a gun every time.
No.
So if you go in a combat zone, or if you go in a military, on a deployment, you know that you're in harm's way.
High alert.
Plenty of combat vets that are good, plenty are bad, right?
But then you come home. The difference between that and what a career cop has to do is they may go from reading to an elementary school kid to doing that. So you're not out, you are in the community, you're embedded, you are not an occupying institution, you're not at war. And so you cannot treat the general public as your enemy. Yeah. You can't even be heightened aware just in normal situations because you would be calling me saying, why is this deputy putting his hand on his gun when he stopped me?
Yeah.
Listen, one of the most common, why is there 2 deputies here? I'm a good person. Why are 2 deputies pull up here? So that's a pretty common, and I get it.
Is that pretty common?
Because, it's wildly common, but because people are embarrassed. They don't see it the same way. And so it's just a little different in that what makes a good police officer, a good deputy sheriff, is the ability to think and the ability to communicate and to be empathetic and be able to do the hard things.
Yeah.
So go back when you said training for a second. Not enough. Because when we talk about training, you are probably thinking shooting, driving, defensive tactics, because that's what people talk about.
But
right?
I also think because and you've mentioned it, so maybe I'm thinking it just because you just now mentioned it. But I also think like interaction with the public. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You've got to have there's got to be training on approaching a vehicle or whatever.
Sure. But there's also autism awareness, stroke identification, medical conditions on the side.
Epileptic.
Hey, what if my child is scared of the police? Bias-based policing, profiling. What's the legal overdosing? And for every individual, their cause is important. And I'm not saying they're not important.
That's right. You're right.
But literally everyone is now adding more and more hours to curricula. And the curricula has been from the 70s, you started with this basic little curricula, and now you've added all this stuff. They're all important.
Yeah.
How do you interview a child? How do you do domestic violence? So one of the things you guys remember, the Gabby Petito murder, which happened out and made national news. Yes. Right? Didn't happen in Florida.
Right.
Florida law just changed where they wanted us to ask like 10 questions every time and go through this litany of things because the legislature, the family said, listen, we want some changes. We think something should be done. It's a great idea by itself, but in the actual application, systems analysis says that, if you guys remember Van Battinger, he said single solution optimization will almost invariably lead to a disruption somewhere else in the system, right?
Yeah.
So if I spend all my time focusing on this, something else is going to do because you can't.
Something's got to give.
Something's got to give.
Something's got to give.
Something's got to give. And so you got to. It's a Pareto distribution, right? Which is some people call it the 80-20 rule,
right?
Which is all the 20% of 80% of the outcomes by 20% of the people, right? That's just the reality of the business we're in, and so you're always constantly balancing what is important to the public now, and then what is practical. What is the balance? How much can you train? How much can you afford for me to train? How much can you afford for me to pay a deputy sheriff? Giving a 3% raise to our public safety employees ticks my budget about $4.5 million. That's 3%. Wow. 3%. 3%. Most people aren't going to notice.
Right.
But you as a taxpayer say, your budget just went up $5 million.
Right. Well,
So there's a balance in all this stuff.
For sure. What made you get into law enforcement though?
So a couple of things, and it's funny because you mentioned Julie, again, Porterfield, and I remember in about 1986, 87, there was a little girl here who was beat to death by her father, and that's the short, as nice as I can put it. And it just always resonated with me. The little girl's name was Autumn. I still remember her name. And I went back and pulled her case, probably 10 or 15 years ago, and I was probably 15 or 16, but it always stuck with me.
Really?
No, always stuck with me. Always.
And you just felt from that, in that kind of world, this idea to be a protector, and
I have this, I don't know. I've always just had this sense of what I'm gonna. I don't think what I do is always right. I think I want to do the right thing. How about that?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
I feel that. No.
So that's kind of what. That's
normal. We all make mistakes.
Yeah. But I just wanted to. I wanted to feel like it mattered.
Yeah.
And so that was something to me. There's about 40 years of good social science from the London School of Economics that says if you want to know what motivates people, what really motivates people always tell you it's money, right? And they always say money. It actually de-incentivizes most people, quite frankly. Once you get to if your needs are met, if your needs are met, it's got to be met. But what motivates people is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. You want to be good at what you do. You want to be a master of your skill, whatever that is. Autonomy, you want to be able to work without me standing right over your shoulder, and you want what you do to matter.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that my business kind of touched all that. So I didn't know that at the time I got started. I didn't understand that, but that's really where it comes down.
And then from when you got this desire, you graduated out of high school, and you're from Walton County, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
From Walton County,
6 generations.
That's amazing.
Caught the boat over.
That's amazing.
We caught the boat over.
Caught the boat over.
Left with a potato and a bottle of whiskey, and there we go.
We just came on
out here.
That's right. Salad in Santa Rosa Sound or something.
And then you hung out with the Seminoles.
We've been here a hot minute.
Then you went to FSU.
I did, correct.
And criminology, is that right?
Yeah, right. Got my master's and from Florida State University. I've got my master's my master thesis was an application of kind of Lean Six Sigma, Kaizen principles and the administration of logistics and law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when my master's was in. I stayed in Tallahassee for about, almost 18 years. I came back here right around 2006.
Policing in Tallahassee.
Policing in the law enforcement field there, and then came back here in really early 2006, was chief of police in Defuniak Springs, and then in 2008, I made a decision to run for sheriff. Never intended to, by the way, two things, never intended to move back to Walton County.
Wow.
Was 100% not going to do that.
Right.
And
this is the greatest place on earth, by the way.
Well, so it is now, but you got to understand when I remember when the first stoplight was put in this county, so you need to keep that in mind.
Right, right.
I remember
That's
when they opened it at
amazing.
Hardee's in 1976,
So
77.
you went to Fort Walton for high school then?
No. I went to Defuniak Springs.
Oh, yeah.
Walton High School.
So
Yeah.
That'd be Highway 90.
yeah, but you know what was funny? When we moved back here, my wife was telling me she was looking for a job at Rosemary Beach, and she went for a job interview. And I said, "There's no place called Rosemary Beach in Walton County." She goes, "Oh no, it's sorry about Alice." I said, "Listen, I've lived here my whole life." I said, "That is not right. There's no place called Rose." I had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah, I lived in what's Seagrove now. My grandparents had a place there in 70s. I don't know, the late 70s.
Right.
Everybody
Right.
did them before they sold them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Hindsight's 2020 on that.
Right.
Yeah.
One-story brick house. or
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely. Flat tar,
Yeah.
tar roof and the screened-in porch. So I just didn't see myself coming back here. But anyway, it did, and just that's kind of like.
And you've kind of grown with it. What made you decide to run for sheriff? I mean, you're a chief of police. I mean, I know you've shared with us the difference between the two. But what got you?
So kind of two things. One, even when I came back here, my plan was to leave and go to different larger agencies and bounce around. In fact, I talked to the chief of police of Tallahassee about it. I said, "Listen, boss, here's my plan." By the way, he is now the sheriff in Leon County. But I told him, I said, boss, here's kind of my plan. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think about this? And I talked to some people I respect, and they said, yeah, this is a good idea. Go do 2 years there, 3 years there. Okay. Go to a little bigger agency, do these kind of things. But when I got here, I was so dissatisfied with what I thought was the state of professionalism and my sense, not that I was right, but my sense of what was right and wrong, or the way things should be done, it just infuriated me. For lack of a better way of, I just didn't like anything about it. So
when you guys so we talk about vacationers. This place has grown. You got Rosemary, Grayton,
16 communities,
16 different communities. I mean, Santa Rosa Beach. It's just all of Miramar. It's all of these things. What do you want vacation? We hit metropolises that are basically the folks that come here from Atlanta to New Orleans and everything in between. What do you want vacationers to know when they come out here?
Treat my home like it's your home.
Oh, man, boy.
The beach is not the biggest ashtray in the world.
That'll preach.
Treat my wow. What a great. I guess you probably get asked this all the time.
It's just real easy. It's not a complicated question.
It's not a complicated question.
No, it's not a complicated
We're not
question.
your friend.
I mean, and do they need to know anything about these LSVs, which are golf carts, basically?
Do I have to tell you can't drive it on Highway 98? Really?
I feel like you have to tell people this.
Educational plan, so actually talk about that as a concept for just a second.
Yeah.
Talking about there's a difference between a low speed vehicle and a golf cart, right?
Yeah.
Here's the other problem. Here's kind of the fundamental problem. A lot of times people confuse what they don't like with what's illegal.
Okay.
Right? So I don't like golf carts low speed vehicles tying up traffic on 30A.
Right.
It makes me angry. Ergo, it must be illegal. Right?
Well, not really.
Not really. Now, there's plenty of them that are illegal. We stop hundreds and hundreds of them.
Right.
But really, a lot of it is I don't like. Now that I live here, if you've moved here and you live here, you go, I don't like all these people here being loud. I don't like all the people here. And so I want you, Sheriff, to put a stop to it.
Right.
And so kind of what we have found is that there is this balance of what is the perception of tourism, what is the perception of what is acceptable.
Right.
We had a couple of years ago, we had a lot of problems with juveniles in Seaside, but a large, absent one or two major events, one or two. Mm-hmm. By the way, if that's your major event, policing is going really well for you.
Yeah.
But absent a couple of days, was actually fine, other than what you had was screaming and yelling kids. So you don't like screaming and yelling at kids, and you want me to stop that. Well, that's, I can't be your parent.
Yeah.
Too. So there's always this balance. So to me, it is for us with the tourism. What happens is, and with no disrespect, but the Suburban comes here from Atlanta, and we open the doors, and 7 kids go out, and mom, dad had wine night, and they let their kids go
do whatever they want to do.
So it's a parenting issue 100%. That becomes a
public servant issue.
And then it becomes your problem when they do something that breaks the law.
Yeah, or that kids do. Guess what? Kids are loud and they scream and they go in flocks.
Well,
that's a fact.
We all did it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely you did.
But what makes this community, the spring breaks and all of those things, different than our neighbors right next door in Bay County? And by the way, I love those people. I have lots of friends over there.
You don't want the deal they've got.
It's unbelievable the difference between one county
and their
another.
Their sheriff, I guess it was a sheriff, was just quoted in the paper saying, "We got to stop this, guys. I don't know what's going on." And I hear like what's happening there and what's going on there is just different.
That's why you don't understand that. But again, I want to go back to the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you. Right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we forget how good we actually have it here.
Yeah.
I can't say that largely. People don't want to hear that.
Right.
But if low-speed vehicles are your problem and yelling kids are your problem,
it's
a problem.
You moved to the right place.
But it's a problem. I'm not saying it's not important to you.
Right.
But in my world...
Coming from Tallahassee?
Well, I say that.
Tallahassee is different than this.
But even in, we'll hear people all the time, well, nothing happens here. You don't know what happens, right? B, it happens infrequently enough in your mind that you're not worried about it. That's a good thing from where I sit. That to me, that is a great thing from my standpoint. So I would rather you complain about traffic and yelling kids and doing that. And if that's that's the main thing you're concerned with, we're in pretty good shape.
I don't know how you guys do it year in, year out. Everybody out there, we live in between like Orange Beach and Panama City Beach, and everybody understands those, and those are great places.
Yeah.
But why is it not like that on spring break here?
Well,
it's a total. You cross the county line, it's different. This is more families.
Yeah. Well, two things. So let's give a little credit where credit's due, and I'm going to be honest about this. I was talking about county commissioner earlier. I don't know if we were on the air at the time, but go back to. I guess you have to have a little deeper sense of history local from politics, right? And we all love to talk about what county commissions or legislatures don't do. But I'm going to give some credit here, which I think was very astute. The reason Walton County is in this, one of the main reasons in the shape it's in now financially, that it's different, is that in about 1990, you had 5 county commissioners. I think 3 were farmers, 1 worked for the state road department, and 1 was a clerk at a store. And they made a decision to not allow anything over 4 stories to be built South Tallahatchie Bay. Fundamentally, they are the ones that set aside topsoil, contrary to popular belief. They are also made a decision to run garbage and get water across it. They protected us from being wall-to-wall condominiums down 38.
Wow.
So if you look, that's why there's single-family residences up and down 38 and not high-rises like we did in Panama City.
Which they build them pretty big. I mean, beds and heads.
But that's an isolated.
We can talk about that.
So that's one house, and you can shut down that house instead of a whole hotel.
But that shouldn't be allowed to happen. I mean,
I know it's got crazy.
But it's still not a condo that's 20 stories high.
No, even so, right. Even if it's 5 families, it's different.
So the average daily cost is significantly higher in Walton County. So that becomes a barrier to entry. And so that's
because you're renting a house. You rent a house, not a couple bedrooms.
Yeah, you put 18 of your buddies in a condo.
And by the way, you're paying $10,000 a week,
right, or more,
going to Rosemary,
or more, depending on where it's at.
Yeah. So there's a barrier to entry that immediately makes a difference. Secondly, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way, they are heavily policed. We are heavily policed.
You guys are. I've seen it on the beach.
We cancel days off. We do a lot of stuff to keep people, and the public demands it. Yeah. And listen, it's interesting because, and this is a very supportive community. Look, you go back to, this is not I Love Mike, but I think it's important to understand what they feel about policing. We just had an election. We went back in with 92% of the vote. I can't do any better than that.
No, I know.
This is my 20th. This is my 5th term.
I know.
It doesn't get any better than that. Trust me. And so but so people are very supportive.
It was over in the primaries.
Yeah, it was over in the primary. But the truth is, people still want us to hire more deputy sheriffs. And which is great. We want to do that.
Or what do you think?
We do. But the problem is, to your point of training, it's about an 18-month turnaround before I know what I've got.
Oh wow!
From the point of you turning an application, to me figuring out if you're going to be worth us having. Yeah. I'm going to be into you $150,000, $200,000.
That's like a new hire, not somebody.
That's somebody. That's exactly right. Well, I'm careful about taking transfers because I don't want somebody else's problem. And it's been my experience. If you've worked for multiple agencies at the same level,
not a good sign.
Reason, the problem is probably not the agency.
Yeah,
probably you.
It's probably you.
Well, you're probably a lot of cops move here because of
that's a little bit different situation. Right? If you worked at a agency and you came here from Memphis or you came or whatever, first of all, you have to agree with my philosophy.
Yeah,
right. You may not like Mike Atkinson's philosophy of sheriffing. Right. And that's fine. I'm not everybody's flavor,
Right.
I don't like me. My wife gets enough. Yeah, my wife gets enough of me for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't like me sometimes, so that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. But so you have to kind of have what I call the general philosophy of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. We're not for everybody.
So what do you think? Like, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in college, I just had graduated high school. I had no money. I was running up in my hometown, and I come up over a hill. I was going too fast.
Yeah.
The officer shot I guess the laser at me or whatever he had, and he was driving. So we were coming. He turned around and then pulled me over, gave me a ticket. I went to I was going to Georgia State University. I went to the law library and looked up some Latin term that was like, essentially it was a clear day and it was straight road. And there's nothing.
Speeding of it, so it was not just whatever. Yeah.
Right. I looked up something because I had no money, so I went to go fight it.
Oh my goodness.
I went to go fight it. I went into the courtroom at the magistrate or whatever. No, the guy was great. One thing I did is I'd heard the guy was stickler for dress, so I put tie on, suit, jackets, pants, all this. 19-year-old kid, and I went in and I said something about, because I think he said the judge asked, did you know they had body camera or a camera on his car? And I was like, well, I've seen cops, and he goes, we don't ever call them cops. And I said, no, it's the show. It was the show.
Yeah.
And he ended up liking how I did. He still gave me points on my license, but he did cancel the ticket cost.
What? Yeah.
Well, he was not. He said, look, you came in here respectfully. You did what you were, and we don't want to punish you, but he said you're still gonna get the points on your license because you were wrong, but I won't make you pay the $100 ticket.
Mike has learned that lesson, and one of your fine deputies has pulled her over, and she's 16. She's 2 years older now.
Yeah,
but she didn't realize how fast she was going down there by down there by in the beach.
Yeah.
And that straightaway.
Yeah. You get going there at 65, but you get a heavy foot. You do 85, 90. That's dangerous.
She was going 95
speed.
I was actually just fixing to say I'm not a fan of giving 16-year-old tickets because typically what I do is, however, you get to a speed that you're getting to those kind of speeds, you got to stop going.
But I want to tell you what happened. This is really cool. So she was honest about everything, and I was just fuming. Right? I'm like, thank God you're okay. But she took real responsibility at 16. She put on her clothes and she went to court. But first she apologized to the officer for putting him in danger.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I made you go this fast to catch me and putting you in danger. And then she apologized to everybody in the courtroom.
That's when it gets to that level, I agree, it's probably something that has to be like, look, you really need to know, and you're in that 95. That's dangerous.
Dangerous.
I stopped a guy on my way over here. I had to stop a guy on here, and I was like,
all the way over here.
And I stopped.
Sorry, guys. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So he's weaving in and out of traffic. He's driving on people's rear end. Of course, I know I'm coming to you guys. Like, I don't want to be late, but that's I said, well, I'm not going to. So we stop him. Yeah. And first he says, well, you need to get slow drivers out of the left lane. I said, how about we start with your own? How about you, as an adult, start with your own personal responsibility?
That's right. Quit blaming people.
That's something my child says.
Yeah, and my 6-year-old
he got away with it.
My 6-year-old
isn't that like a I-75 sort of thing? But not on like 98. It's a 2-lane road.
Listen, and this was heavy traffic. He's bobbing in and out. That's an excuse. And he was mad. I said, well, look, I'm of the reality is you got to work to get a ticket from me. Yeah. So, but just accept some personal responsibility for your own behavior.
So let me tell you, and I hate to say this, my daughters will kill me, but both of my daughters, my son, No, never had.
He had the pickup truck.
He did
try
fine,
to get that going,
but
fast.
he never had anybody. He's never had anybody pull him over.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, right? And he's followed. He's followed the laws of the road. But my daughters have both been speeding, not crazy, but 15 miles over. They've been pulled over by the Walton County, your sheriff's department. They are so kind. What you just said that I don't like to give 16-year-olds.
Yeah,
they
we try to call parents.
They called us on the phone and said, "I'm going to trust that you're going to handle this."
Yeah. That's our
and it was such a great community service to us. And we had incredible discussions about safety and all of that. And
we had a deputy.
So appreciative.
We had a deputy. Well, first of all, both my daughters got tickets.
Yeah.
So let me start with that.
Happens.
But I want to make a point about that because again, this goes back to public perception from that standpoint. They didn't say my daddy's the sheriff.
Right.
They didn't say nothing.
Good for them.
That's not the business we're in at my house.
That's right.
But there was a 16-year-old. One of our deputies stopped and he stopped her on 30A, and she was speeding. She was pretty good speed. He wrote her a ticket, but she had a driver's license for 5 days.
That's mine.
And I just said, listen.
Same with mine.
I said, listen, there was a better way to handle this.
Yeah.
I don't dismiss tickets, contrary to public. However, in this case, there was a better way to handle this.
Yeah.
It's not that he was wrong. It wasn't the best judgment for the situation, right? So that's what we kind of talk about a lot. Is what's the best judgment? And so that's one of those things you learn with a little bit of maturity and a little bit of doing something else before you get into this profession.
I gotta finish how she finished. I showed her YouTube videos of car wrecks at 100 miles an hour, which she was 5 miles, and her face just goes white. And I just kept playing them more and more. I go, out of all these videos we've watched, what do you think the outcome was? She's like, nobody made it. And I'm like, that guy could have saved your life tonight. You didn't realize how fast you were going. You were with some friends. You got a car for the first time.
Right.
He saved your life. It's a ticket, whatever. At least you're alive, and now you get to come home to me.
We got 4 kids that are good, that are dead from this traffic crash the other night.
That's right.
I
saw that.
Terrible.
That was almost the same exact place. That's like Inlet Beach, right?
It's right there. It's right there. So I get it. It was such a way, and she's never had a problem. Not one problem.
Well, that's what you want, right? You want them to not.
I don't like those points on that.
You want them to learn
insurance than I
You want them to
to.
learn. How can we as citizens of Walton County though help support your department?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question. I think that's something that just being engaged, just being aware of what your sheriff's office, and again, I want to say Walton County is a little bit different because we are fire rescue as well too.
I did not know
and
that.
so we're fire rescue north of the bay. South Walton is you have a special fire district here,
right?
And then, but north of the bay, we handle that as well too. And we're Walton Air Rescue. We handle the air medical for the county as well, and we're also animal control for the county. And we're the county jail. Well, it's $110 million. You better get your money's worth out of it.
That's right.
So, so it's a big operation, but I just think that one of the most important things you can be is an informed public, right? Or willingness to listen. One of the things that we have found, we have a pretty large social media presence. We can all talk about the good or bad of social media, but here we are on it.
Y'all actually do a great job. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Your social media person is spot on.
The great thing is you can touch everybody. The bad thing is everybody has a platform, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, I don't need to be the fastest person out there. What I need to be is right.
Yeah, that's what everybody complains about too.
Yeah, and so we've taken the philosophy that it's more important to be right than it is to be first, to the best of our ability. That can cause some consternation. So what I always say is, listen, if the public wait to hear the full and understand, there's some things I simply can't tell you to start with.
That's exactly.
And it's just that simple. And that's one of those things that we just have to hold the line on. There's certain things we're just not going to say publicly and disparage and do some of these other things. And that's probably the biggest thing. I would say wait to hear the fullness of a story.
That's
be engaged.
The full measure of the story, right?
There's always
you're
more to
in
it.
investigation, and then sometimes even if you complete your investigation, sometimes the public doesn't need to know every single detail.
And not only do they not need to know, there's certain things that I know for absolute that I just simply can't tell you.
I actually think your page, by and large, tends to be pretty transparent, especially on your social media. I think your social media person, by the way, is just hilarious.
She's a rock star.
I mean, hilarious. The engagement that they have, it's just, I get I actually read it all the time because it's it's super informed. So I'd encourage you, if you live down here, you need to follow the Walton County Sheriff's social media page, whether it's Instagram or Facebook.
Different message on each one, by the way.
Is it really?
Yeah. So it's a different message on each one based on what the audience for that particular demographic.
So smart.
Yeah.
I so smart. This missing hiker. I mean, he's still missing.
Yes, he's still missing.
That's crazy.
Oh.
So, but I want to stay on that because I think one of the things people understand about our public information officers, you would not believe how the level of abuse that they can take from the general public, with 6 or 7 people that did not get their way on something. One of the things that we see, listen, we should be open to critique and criticism. That is a perfectly acceptable thing.
Part of America, for sure.
It's what we should be about.
Sure.
But what we've noticed is some of our business are people we refuse to hire. So
wow.
that is, and we never say that. I can tell you, maybe if you follow somebody, go, you wanted a job really badly.
Yeah,
or we dismissed you for honesty issue.
I see the same people commenting a lot on social media.
So that's a clue.
Yeah, that's a clue for me.
They don't have a job. They don't have a job, and they sure don't have a job with us.
I see occasionally your social media person will comment and be like, "Are you okay, so and so?" They keep saying, "Are you okay?"
You're pretty angry here. So everything, just because you don't know something doesn't mean it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, that's what I agree.
It was a secret that was hidden from you.
I agree.
Well, we like conspiracies.
Yeah.
Everybody likes a conspiracy.
I love that comedian says you don't believe in any conspiracy. Not one.
How many aliens are working on the force?
Yeah. But I think being engaged and being willing to listen and say, okay, let me hold. And I know it's hard because you want this information right now.
Yeah.
But it's more important for me to be right than it is to be first.
I agree with that. I totally agree.
To the best of my ability,
I love what you're saying there.
Lawsuits too if you're wrong or if you say something about somebody or whatever.
Listen, it happens. It's hard. What I try really hard is not to be. Winston Churchill had a great quote. If you chase every dog that barks, you'll never get anywhere. And so I try very hard not to use the pulpit. Listen, there's some of these folks. Yeah. We could engage in a battle of wits, and who has the rapier wit, and we'll see how that works out. But I'm not going to do that because I think it's an abuse of my office to do that.
100%.
It's using a gnat. It's using a sledgehammer to kill a gnat.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't serve the people that we're supposed to be serving. Would it feel good? But just like sure. But just like your mother said, if it feels good when you say it, you probably shouldn't say it. And people say to me all the time, why don't you light them up? Because that's not what we're about. And by the way, that's what they want. You empower.
They're empowering it. Yeah, well, pain.
Change, man.
Listen, I get trolls too. I get trolls too. Whether where you post something up there and somebody doesn't like anything, but I also stop pain surfing.
Yeah,
like I don't have to go through and read something. I don't have to go through it. Move on.
You're not. Listen, you had your chance. You 5 times.
That's not changing me.
That's exactly right. Well, this is actually a great time to throw it to our commercial for True North Pest Control. Man, they take care of them bugs down here, and we got a new sign. Look at that.
Look at this.
Hey, y'all. New customer of True North Pest Control here on the Emerald Coast, Central Florida, Georgia. You got to check them out.
Yeah, they get rid of all the unwanted pests in your house, including termites and mosquitoes. Tell them the jabroni sent you. Back to the show.
Well, we are back, and again, thanks so much to True North, man. They do a great job of sponsoring this show, and I appreciate them and both floors.com. But we're back with Sheriff Michael Adkinson, and it is so great. It's just, again, I'm learning so much today. One of the things I did want to ask you about is how does faith, you've talked about that you have some faith center, you've talked a little bit about faith. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you have talked about faith briefly during this conversation, but how does faith influence your role as sheriff?
So I want to be, and this may not make sense, but I want to be a little careful how I say this. Let me tell you why. Because I have a real disdain for those individuals who use their faith or use not necessarily use faith as a calling card for their elected office. I really, really, really dislike that. And I kind of love that. It's like, don't let the left hand know what the right hand's doing. That's kind of my philosophy about that. I would rather be judged on the merit of the way I treat people, right?
I love
it. So do my actions bear witness? The other problem with that is just, quite frankly, every day I fall short of the grace and glory of God, right? So every day I go, that's really not the way you should have handled that, right? And you lay down and go, ugh. And look,
I did that yesterday.
You know why I can't? So the many reasons that it's hard to understand from a Christian standpoint, is I don't know that I could be that forgiving. Like God, you have a forgiving God. And I go, look, I don't even like myself a lot of days.
I always say I'm the second. I say I'm the second worst sinner, right behind Paul.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
Right? He's
Paul's
the
a
chief
tax
of all
collector, right?
sinners,
So,
right?
he was Paul's tax collector too. Right?
An adult putting hands on a child.
That's right.
You know, or like I would just.
Yeah, but I don't even mean that. I mean, I'm going to almost put that with righteous anger, but that's it. I'm going to hold that.
But
no, what I kind of mean is like everybody else. So today, when I stub my toe and say something ugly, or my hubris gets the better of me, or and then I'm like, man, am I reflecting what I want to? And I know that I'm not, right? So that makes it really hard. So I try very hard not to. I just want to make sure I reflect what I believe in a very personal manner and not in a politicized manner. And I've always I felt that.
What's interesting is as you've described how you like to handle situations and how you, it feels like the community embedment. Am I embedding?
I don't know that word, but it sounds really good.
Hey, look, we're a $10 podcast here, so we're just doing as good as we can.
Yeah.
But you're embedding your deputies into the community and the way that you like to treat the community, the way you're walking alongside us. Do you feel like that is somewhat a reflection that you've worked hard over the last 20 years to have some sort of, whether you want to call it Judeo-Christian values, and again, not to put religion on it.
Well, it is.
Putting others before yourself, being kinder, gentler, showing grace. Do you think that's been able to permeate through it? Because it feels like that's what you're talking.
Yeah,
it is
no,
actions,
it's
right?
absolutely culturally. Yeah. This is a manifestation of what I believe in the organization, right? So, and I've tried very hard to push that down at all levels, right?
Sure.
I don't push my faith on other people, but I say there is a acceptable conduct and a culture here. And if you don't if you work at the Walk Nation, you serve at the will and pleasure of the sheriff.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I don't make any money. I'm a hard person to work for. I will be the first one to tell you, I am a hard person to work for. And
your employees are going to really love this part of the podcast.
Details. They know. Yeah, listen, they know that there's no I don't, contrary to popular belief, I actually don't generally get involved in the hiring of employees or typically the firing. That's done. We have 700 plus employees, right?
Sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so, it's a $100 million operation.
Right.
But I do set what I think is the tenor and culture. And I come in and speak to every employee and say, look, there are things that we consider acceptable. You don't have to believe what I believe. In your personal faith, but I will not allow you to embarrass the organization without retribution from that. Now, that's 100%. Just the reality of it.
100%. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to believe in Jesus to say that biblical principles work.
Yeah,
my mother used to tell me that. Right. You don't have to believe in any of this, but being nice to people really work.
Listen, Jonathan Swift, the Irish philosopher, said, years ago, and he said, listen, either this is not the Bible or I've been lied to, when he actually took the time to read it for himself, right? And so I want you to understand certain principles. How you get there is really your own personal journey, right?
Right.
And that's what we've tried to say. But culturally, I'm so careful because it's my own personal shortcomings that scare me to say we're a faith-based organization because I fall so short that I'm afraid of embarrassing my own faith, right? Not embarrassing me because that's the story of my life.
I just was reading about I can't remember her name. Is Elliot was her last name. 1875. She penned the song "Just as I Am," the old hymn.
Love that song. You used to close every Sunday with it.
Right. Billy Graham used to close every revival
George
with
Beverly
it.
Show.
Beverly Shea.
That's
George
right.
Beverly Shea.
Yeah. And
that golden voice.
But she starts it out just as I am, without a plea.
Yeah, amen.
Without a plea. You don't even have a plea.
But what you said is
but
profound.
For your blood, you died for me.
Even though you realize, and I think that's what. Nobody's a saint on this side of heaven. I'm telling you, we're all a mess, and you recognize you're a mess, and that's okay. We're trying to be better every day, but we fall short every day.
So I don't wear a uniform most days. In fact, most days I don't have something with a star. Man, people always ask, so I get a lot of questions about that on occasion.
Yeah.
And there's two reasons. One, it has to do with an approachability factor for a lot of people, right? Two is I always tell people, if I have to tell you I'm the sheriff, I'm probably not a very good one.
Yeah.
If so I try to judge on the measure of the way I treat people. And there was a lady that came in my office, it's probably been 6 or 7 years ago, and she was really upset. And she was her child had a drug problem and had passed away. And she was screaming and yelling, and I let her talk. And she left. Somebody said, you don't have to listen to that. Why don't you put it up? I said, listen, if it makes her gives her 1 ounce of relief to blame me, I'm a big boy. That's the business I'm in.
She lost her kid.
Yeah,
what an amazing
so we just try to tell you that.
What amazing
because it's been extended to me, but it's been extended to me. So
100%.
I don't get a cookie for doing the right thing, But
we should.
But my wife always says, you did that because it made you feel good about yourself. I said, well, I do, and it does.
Yeah,
it's egotistical utilitarianism, right?
Yeah,
so I'm okay. But no, I mean, so that's kind of my philosophy is to try and find this balance between holding accountability. And responsibility and mercy. Because listen, justice without mercy is tyranny.
That's right.
It's absolutely tyranny.
You're exactly right.
And the reason, if you remember, the statue of justice is blind. She's blindfold. And the reason is because otherwise you, as a victim or a citizen, you want absolute retribution. And that's not the business we are in. And so I have to strike that balance. And we don't always get it right. I mean, for sure we don't get it right. But I think where we try to come from is this place of, is this fair? Is this just, does this make sense? Does it serve a greater good in the way we do it, right? So that's kind of the way I approach it. And it's interesting because all three of the undersheriff and my chief deputy, so we're all men of faith, right? And so we talk about this. We have these kind of discussions about this, And so it's interesting. And I think of the people that you mentioned Just As I Am, which I love. I still tend to go with Horatio Spaat's It's Well with My Soul. And the story behind that, and I've thought about this story with children drowning. Listen, and I know I don't have that in me. I wish I had that level of strength in me. So I just try and say, what lessons can we learn? How can we apply them? And you talk about embedded in the community. The truth is, I live here. I don't have to live here, right? I can live
where you want.
Yeah, I can live where. And listen, here's another thing too about working for the government. I don't have a dime for somebody said to me, I pay your salary. You do. You probably pay about a quarter of my salary every person, right?
Right.
But the balance to that is the implication is that you couldn't do something else. Right. And so that's not true. I actually have made very conscious decisions that have cost my family significant amount of money to stay in this. That's not all of Mike, but I'm just my point is it was a conscious decision, not because it was the level of incompetence, right?
No. Well, quite frankly, that was kind of the next question I was going to ask you because you're running over $100 million annual budget, 700 employees.
That's a massive
organization. Massive. That translates into a multiple amount of organizational leadership in the private sector.
Sure.
Have you? I'm sure you've had offers and
have very significant officers. Very significant officers. But here's the thing: I have to fundamentally believe. I got loads of problems, but one of them is I have to believe that it matters. I have to believe that I can add value to what it is. Right. So I got an appointment. I'm sitting on an appointment now from President Trump, and in full disclosure, I was appointed by President Biden before to sit on what's called the FirstNet Authority. That's a $50 billion public-private partnership.
Wow,
that auctions broadband spectrum. In this case, it was auctioned to AT&T, and we manage and oversee how those funds are distributed. It's $50 billion,
with a B,
reoccurring, and the FCC just authorized another block of spectrum, which is going to be worth about another 15 to 20 billion. There are plenty of other things I can do. I just still believe in what I'm doing now. And the other thing is, I think I have not just a fiduciary responsibility, but I have a moral obligation to prepare leaders to take over. And so that's where I think that's the season.
That obligation.
Well, I think so too. I mean, that's
why we are doing this show.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That's this the season of my life now. Right?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. I'm spending a lot of time, really pushing people to be capable of running a 700+ person organization, $100 million. What are their do they have any character flaws? I need to know now. Now, ultimately, I don't get to make that decision, right? The public gets to make that decision, which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
But my responsibility is to give you qualified advocates for you to choose from. That's what we're doing now. And, we've got some folks that we're looking at, and we've spent – it's actually hard for me because it requires me to take my hand off the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very hard for my personality to do that, but I'm really doing that because it is important. Not because I don't want to be involved in it intimately. It's not in the best interest of the organization for me to do this. And so we are really pushing a couple of people to be leaders.
What makes you, so that observation of what is right for the organization, that observation of building this culture, how do you step back as a leader? How do you step back and kind of get the helicopter view to make that? Do you have mentors? Do you have advisors? What allows you to step back and go? Because when you're in it, I feel like sometimes when you're in it, you can't see it.
Well, it's hard too because remember, there's an ego factor in this too, right?
Right.
You get better looking when you get elected. You're losing weight. My hair's going back. I said I got a face for radio, but suddenly I'm pretty. I think a couple of things. I just have a fundamental. I'm a real student of de Tocqueville, in that. You guys familiar with Alexis de Tocqueville on democracy? But my point is that we have an obligation to self-limit ourselves, and to. I just think for the best interest of this organization, that there should come a time when the sheriff should step aside and make way for new ideas, somebody who's going to be better. Right. And so my job is to give the suite of candidates for people to do that, and I'm just trying to be self-aware enough that I understand the season where I'm at. So. That's a struggle. And listen, it's a struggle because it's the difference between being accountable and responsible, right? So we can all be responsible for task or project, but you can't give away accountability. Accountability. You're responsible for a task. I'm responsible for the outcome.
For everything.
We can't share that.
Win or lose, I'm in charge.
Yeah, win or lose, my name's on the side of the building. If it goes right, you get the credit. If it goes wrong, it's on me. Right? And that's the way we do that. And so teaching these men and women that is you can get somebody, you can work as a group and be responsible. Right. But one man or woman's going to be accountable for this task.
That's right.
I had 18 when I first came into office. We were going through this thing called accreditation, where we were trying to achieve outside independent auditors to come in and look at the way we do business, which we do every year. We have multiple audits a year, and we've had they said the gold standard for fiscal responsibility.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Nobody cares because they think it's something we just say, right?
I care as a constituent and a citizen of Walton County. I care.
Here's kind of what's cool about this, in my opinion. So when we were first looking at a couple of different accreditations, one of the things was a lot of people didn't think we needed it. They said, look, you already do good. We don't need this. And I said, well, I knew that we couldn't get a level of buy-in because there were some folks that did not think it was as important as I did. And so I had somebody who I trusted. He said, Sheriff, you are going, and I was the youngest sheriff in Florida at the time.
Oh, wow.
And he said, you're the accountable person here. And you need to decide, if you're going to allow, whether or not you can allow this. So I called 17 staff members in, and I had them write letters of resignations and sign them. And I had to put it in the human resource, and I said, understand this. If your failure to accomplish the task you're assigned through your own malfeasance or misfeasance or lack of engagement, you can consider that dated.
Wow.
Because we wanted to set a thing of there is going to be a standard for excellence here, and you will adhere to it as long as my name's on the building.
That's amazing. It's just
that changes the culture real fast. Though.
I've been here 9
vacancies too, by the way.
It really is.
Yeah, it can create vacancies.
That's okay.
So let me tell you about our fire rescue. We took over fire rescue a few years ago north of the bay.
Yeah. Okay.
And people came to me and said, why should a sheriff run fire rescue? A sheriff shouldn't run fire rescue. Well, a city should run it or a county should run it. I was like, okay. Should it be with the people that pave roads, pick up trash, pass ordinances, or should it be with the men and women who run toward the smell of smoke and the sound of gunfire, who work 365 days a year, who, you're right, it should be with the city or the county. So we never, but, and I said that just kind of quickly and flippantly, but it's true.
Yeah.
Well, when we took over Fire Rescue, we said, look, we're going to have a new level of standard of excellence. So now Walton County Fire Rescue is one of only 10 in the entire state of Florida that is medically accredited.
Really?
Let me say that for you, 10. 10. So the next fire rescue is medically accredited. Besides Walton County Fire Rescue, you got to go to Tampa, Orlando, Broward, Hillsborough.
Wow.
There's nowhere besides us.
When you say it's medically accredited, what does that mean?
It means that we've achieved the highest levels of EMS care in our fire rescue organization, that we have met this standard.
And when they show up, they know what
they're top of they are on top of the game. In the state of Florida, they're in the top 10 of people that meet these standards.
Is that just for North Walton?
It's just North Walton, right. But they can do it here. Listen, so South Walton has a great fire, and they actually.
I love the group right there on Mac Bayou,
yeah, they do a great
right
job.
by my house.
They do a job. But my job is to brag on my people.
100%.
So, but I'll brag on South Walton too. We have a great relationship with Chief Crawford and South Walton Fire District. Yeah. But my situation is a little bit different because when I say. This is about being a chief executive as opposed to dealing with boards and other stuff, So I can set a vision, a tempo, or say this is our priority. We just got pediatric accredited, so we're only one of 2 in the entire state of Florida that is pediatric accredited.
Yeah, that's
in the entire state.
Wow,
there's one, and there's North Walton County Fire Rescue.
Wow.
Right? So we entered into a P3, a public-private partnership to bring a medical helicopter. And so we do the medical air for the entire county.
Gotcha. Right.
And it was so I'm afraid to fly a little on that. I don't fly for fun. I fly for business. But
the helicopter business. After the Hudson
they're really good. They're really good. I mean, it's really worked well.
When trauma happens in this county, where do when you have to life flight, where does it go?
So typically, it just depends. So Fort Walton Beach Medical is Fort Walton Beach is a level 2 trauma center.
Okay.
Pensacola, Fort Walton.
Okay.
It just depends on the circumstances.
Right.
Bay. So it's usually one of those 3.
Gotcha. Yeah.
When we did the costing analysis on this with the company Air Methods that we were working with, we said for it to make sense. And what I negotiated was that nobody was going to get a bill for $20,000.
Yeah.
So I was like, look, we're not. It has to be in network, and we worked out some really advantageous things for the citizens of Walton County. But for it to work, they figured it around 30 flights a month. They're doing like mid-40s.
Wow.
So the need is there.
Wow.
That many in this
county?
need
is there.
Yeah.
Do you think that our county will ever, kind of have it just feels like Fort Walton's an hour away, Bay's an hour.
Yeah, for sure.
It seemed, and we've got, what's the hospital?
Sacred Heart down
Sacred
here.
Heart. I lose the
North
name.
Walton Doctors Hospital.
But what's the next step for us? And I know this isn't your department, but you've been here 6 generations.
So listen, I had a good chance to talk. The one of the top 2 or 3 rated heart transplant surgeons in the world graduated Walton County High School.
Oh, man.
And so Dr. Sheffield is with the Cleveland Medical Clinic. He's head of their transplant program.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's amazing.
And, he has spoken on several occasions about building transplant center here.
Okay.
And he'd raised over $600 million at one time. I know was looking to do that. Tallahassee Memorial is looking at doing some clinics, some work over in the Inlet Beach area.
Okay.
So there's some stuff coming there, But I want to go back to the public safety overall with the county, because I think listen, I live south of the bay.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that it's important for people to understand there's such a great level of coordination between South Walton Fire District, the Sheriff's Office, our fire rescue component, and South Walton. So all these folks are not in competition.
Right.
And I think one of the things that happens when you're in a political world like I am, everything becomes I'm the boogeyman. The sheriff wants to take over everything.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, trust me.
Oh, you should. When I told people you were coming on, you should hear the questions I did get to. They wanted me to ask.
I actually, you're not going to rattle me with questions like that. That's the business.
That's so good.
That's the business I'm in. If I can't answer the hard questions, it doesn't, those police fire away, that doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
But the reason I bring this up is because there are things that I think make sense for public safety that I don't get paid one more penny to take on employees. So if I had 150 employees or I have 700, I don't make any more money. It's not the way that works.
Right.
And the county doesn't control my salary. It's set by the state statute. What I kind of look at anything we do is, can we do it better, more efficiently, and as a service citizen of Walton County? If the answer is no to either one of those questions, I don't want to be part of it.
Right.
So, but what I have found over the years is everybody thinks we're trying to take everything over, right? And it's always the same. But you got to ask those two questions, right? Can we do X, Y, or Z better? Does it make sense? And is there a need to do it? And if there's not, there's just not.
Yeah.
So, I'll come back to even like South Walton Project. They do a great job. You don't need us down here.
Right.
It's just, everything's fine.
And we're not going to do it better. You're good. So there you go.
Well, I'm always going to argue we do it better. Because that's I'm in the business to do it. And you know what? If Chief Crawford was here, Ryan would say, we're going to do it better. No, they do a great job. And I think that's just important to understand that none of us are in competition. Now, inside my own organization, I actually push for competition. And so some people don't like that.
That's right.
But I encourage that entire
I like competition.
Yeah,
I think it's good. I think you get people under pressure. You can see what's happening. One of the folks we had on not too long ago was some folks with like Safe in the Panhandle, and they're doing, I don't know if you know that organization. They're trying to help women get out of like sex trafficking in that world. I mean, look, it's in every area there's sex trafficking. I mean, how does Walton County rate in that world, and how do we, because it's a tough thing, because it's an underbelly of society.
So I need to bifurcate that a little bit, and what I mean by that is this: that has become, because of certain movies and certain things, that has become I used to teach at Florida State, and I would ask my students sometimes. And I like that, by the way. They were my innovation lab, because they don't care if you're the sheriff or not; they're going to tell it to you. But so it was a really good opportunity for me to kind of see what these young folks were thinking. And I would ask, maybe if I had 130 students or I had 40 students, whatever. Let's say, what do you want to do? I want to work and fight human trafficking. So, okay, what is that?
What's that look like?
And nobody can answer that because there's misunderstanding that everybody is being snatched off the streets.
Right.
So here is what human trafficking looks like largely in Walton County and largely across the country.
Yeah.
It's the 15-year-old runaway that is with her boyfriend and that he is prostituting her out. And she'll run away 4 and 5, 6 times. We'll come and get her and bring her home. The truth is, if she was here from Moldova, you would go get her a home. You would help her, provide services for it. That is more compelling to people than the 15-year-old who's local that gets trafficked. I don't know why. It's very similar to the reason people are absolutely willing to help with animal abuse cases.
Right.
But they won't help with children abuse cases.
It's
too much sense of it's human nature, because if it's too close to home, you might feel some personal responsibility. When it's the girl from Czechoslovakia, when it's the girl from from Kenya, there's this cognitive dissonance. That's different. This is this. She's just a runaway. This girl over here is just a runaway. She's so it's such a, that is largely what you have. That is by far the vast majority of traffic. Now,
well, you've got the massage parlor stuff too.
Those kind of things.
That's got to be hard to shut them down.
It's almost impossible because it's with languages. There's barriers.
They don't know how to report it.
By the way, or that they believe that their situation is better.
Yeah.
So you got that other problem. On top of that now. And then mental illness, engaging in these type of things are so difficult. We do not have the level. We are the largest mental health provider in the county as the sheriff's office. We should not be. Our jail is the mental health provider, right? That is a problem. That's a problem. So I only say that not to say that human trafficking is not an issue. What I'm saying is it's become more of a call celeb for these big name cases than it is for the things that have the. It's like terrorism. Let me give you an example. And I used to do this with my students all the time because I think it's an interesting point. If you take every U.S. military combat death involved in the war of terrorism, and you take every United States citizen killed by an act of terrorism since 1990, the totals of those are about 39,000. 42,000 people were killed in a traffic accident last year. But so why do we just walk that off? Well, that's just traffic crashes. but we're searched before we go on everything. Everything is about terrorism.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not important.
And that's
My
from
problem is-
1990. We were talking.
forward. Look it up.
Yeah,
All
we're talking
comment-
90 versus 1 year.
Versus 1 year.
Right.
Wow.
Year over year, year.
Wow.
So why do you accept the deaths and traffic accidents so blasé?
Why do?
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Why is it harder to make a DUI arrest than it is, to make a murder arrest half the time?
Right.
So there's a lot of things involved in this because you're prepared to say, oh, that's just the cost of doing business, right? And so there is a real distortion of what the actual impact of some of these things really are. The impact of having intact families, you want to reduce.
Well, if you want to reduce sex trafficking and all that, like,
right
let's
there.
get rid of pornography. Like, guys,
Listen.
we've said that before. Like, guys, we can
On the
shut
show.
down the industry by not looking at the crap.
So
you know?
90% of
Yeah.
internet traffic's on pornography. So
100%.
that's a fact.
Yeah.
Then the secondary part of it is you won't. I have a lot of rehabilitation programs at jail, and I catch a little bit of grief about this. We run a commercial driving school. We run a welding program. We run a carpentry program. We're in a 3-year longitudinal study with Florida State University to determine the efficacy of our programs. Now, here's what's interesting to me.
That's great. So you've got the programs, but it's not just like you're.
Yeah,
we're
because I
see
don't
what
want to
works.
just take my word for it.
Right.
Yeah, because I say
Is it doing what we're hoping it's
But I
doing?
got to tell you what's funny. Some of a lot of the criticism is, well, Sheriff, you should be doing this. We're the only jail in the country running this study.
Wow.
In the United States of America.
Wow.
We're it. But I got a lady that pretty much every week tells me how terrible we are because we're not doing it this way. I said, do you understand that
Nobody's
else,
doing it.
Not
Anywhere.
Anywhere. And so, but my point about that is this. You do the best you can, what you have, where you're at.
Yeah,
and you try and make decisions. So if you come to me and you say, I want to work on human trafficking, I don't really want to deal with the local runaway kids. I want to deal with people who their visas are being held, and that certainly happens. It's primarily here in the Hispanic community because what happens is, as you got a multiple problem. Now you got the immigration issue, and
Sure.
regardless of how you feel about all that,
We need them workers here.
The reality of it is, those people are subject to crimes at a higher rate because they're not going to come to me. They're not going to come to me. They don't speak English.
Yeah.
They don't come to me.
They're worried about
I had a guy
what's going to happen
with the local community, Hispanic community. We were talking about this, and he was telling me about a contractor. I could call him by name, and you would all know the name of his business. And he said, we framed these houses for him. They said they're not going to pay us because we're here illegally.
What?
And I said, well, let's prosecute him. Let's go after him. You would know his name.
Right.
And they said, can you guarantee me that I won't be deported? I said, I can't.
That's the hard spot. Yeah, that's
By the way,
hard
big
spot.
Republican, anti-immigration guy, but is using these crews and not paying them.
No,
or paying them high.
By the way,
kind of things.
by the way, that's lowbrow. I mean, it just is.
shady.
When people do work, I don't care where you're from. You got to pay them, and that goes back to that kind of integrity, which is doing it
when everybody's watching.
When everybody's watching, not just when they aren't. That's exactly right.
And
That's
so
exactly right.
And I listen to some of these folks, but I know the facts of it. And so one of the things I make my living on is keeping my mouth shut.
How do you do that so well? I mean, where did you learn that ability to do that?
I got bit in the rear by not doing it.
Yeah,
is that what it is?
A couple times.
Yeah, you got bit. Wisdom comes with scars.
That is brilliant right there.
No, it's sadly true.
Yeah,
right.
sadly true.
Sadly true.
You're exactly right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What was the hard questions? You said you had some.
You have we're easy. We're $10 podcast here. You're crushing it.
Because I think that gives the opportunity.
What question have we not asked?
I'm trying to think of what the
What hard drugs have you used?
Did you inhale?
I live in fear.
I'm trying to think.
I was going to ask if you arrested Burt Kreischer when he went to Florida
Somebody.
State.
What's interesting is somebody at our poker table said something about there was something about fire pay or something like that he wanted asked. I couldn't remember what it was, and I didn't understand why would I ever even ask the sheriff that until now?
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
I don't know what. I can't remember what it was.
You have some firemen and
I don't remember what it was.
Local organizations around this area that make more money than I do. That are not supervisors.
Right.
So you have to be careful when you talk about what people make because a lot of it has to do with overtime and a lot of this a lot of different stuff involved in that. My goal, and I'll just tell you very bluntly, where I'm trying to get to from Walton County Fire Rescue and the deputies is we're going to try and raise it to the base salary to $60,000. I think that's more than it's going to be a battle because you live in the don't raise my taxes, don't spend money world. I get that. but we're paying waste management drivers that. Not that that's not an important job.
It's an important job
we're
for sure. But
I'm going to do it.
I agree,
and we're going to do it this time. Yeah. And we'll just.
Well, that's one of the highest tax counties in the state.
That was actually
it is the lowest property tax county in the state of Florida adjusted.
Oh, okay.
It's not even. It's not Okaloosa. No. Okaloosa and Walton.
I'm thinking of sales tax or something.
Okaloosa and Walton are the two lowest property tax in the state of Florida.
Okay.
Wow,
it might be significant.
Wow,
sales tax 8.5%.
No. There's probably when you add in tourist tax and some of those things. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go.
Well, you're kind of moving just a slight switch of gears from policing. I know you have 2 daughters. You've got a family. But what is your favorite part of being a dad?
So I heard a quote the other day, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I told my daughter she didn't like it. She started crying. She said, I don't like that. And I said, you live your whole life preparing someone to be able to live without you.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I wish I'd said it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I heard my wife's father say when she was graduating college, and he died like a month after we got married. But we were going out to dinner. I'd only met him a handful of times, and so we were out at dinner one night, and she's the baby of 5 kids. And she got up and walked out of the room or something, and her father said to me, I'll live forever through that girl. And I thought, it just kind of resonated with me.
That's cool.
Oh, wow.
And so that's kind of my thing. My children are spoiled.
Both girls?
Rotten.
Right. You got to spoil both
girls? We're all girl dads, by the way. He's got a boy.
Straight to heaven. I have one. Pass to heaven.
Yeah.
But so the thing. But I will tell you this: it's interesting. My daughter's my oldest said something today, which was interesting, and then which was she was just kind of casually talking about somebody else doing something. She goes, talking about another family that that she knew, and she goes, oh, but they're not close like us. See, to me, you got me. Right. And then the other thing, and I heard my youngest say one time, which was about, she said to her sister, I want somebody that treats me like daddy treats mama. Right. So to me is all I'm trying to accomplish.
Check.
Everything
you did pretty good,
else,
Dad.
Yeah, everything else is secondary.
Yeah.
It really is from my standpoint. And that's been the hardest thing about this business.
Yeah.
Because I never anticipated people attacking my children. Right. That was kind of a thing.
That should be out of bounds.
That should be out of bounds.
It's not. There's no such thing as out of bounds.
That's but it should be. That's
good.
ridiculous.
It sounds good.
That's ridiculous. Come on.
Yeah, I guess especially
like
when your daughters are going, if they get into the high schools or whatever.
Absolutely.
I imagine that was probably. Are they both?
Are they in high school? Yeah,
you have one graduated, right?
Yeah, she's graduated this next week. She'll actually finish with her teaching degree. She went to Tampa, and now she's finishing a teaching degree. She's teaching now. My other daughter, listen. I don't know what the baby's going to do. She could split the atom, or she could go to work at a farm.
Right.
That's mine too.
She's a sport
we have no idea.
She's a Troy.
She's a Troy. Oh, very good. Very good.
Those are the things. But again, the power of anonymity on the internet and the power to the for me,
keyboard warrior.
Listen, it's water off a duck's back.
Yeah,
you're wasting.
Good.
I hate to tell you, you're wasting your time with me. But my wife.
Yeah,
my wife and my girls, that's a different animal.
That's what I was saying. How do you find yourself saying, well, I am going to defend that? Is there times you can't, but what is your wife, like, how do you get around that?
I'll tell you a story so you can appreciate this.
Yeah.
The biggest fight, I've been married 30 years, and the biggest fight we have had in the last 17 years, 16 years, was over a story or people. So you remember a few years ago there was a kid having a house party.
I knew you were going there.
So
I knew you were going there.
By the way, that's nothing. We deal. You cannot believe how many house parties we do. But just
right.
And so we knew the whole backstory to it. I'm not going to get it. Doesn't matter. It's a high school kid party that was advertised for 2 weeks at a location.
Right.
Let that be a clue to you.
Yeah.
Not so smart.
Not so smart.
Yeah. There's a lot to that, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, here to there. And as people started sending it to the newspaper, I was actually surprised that we kept talking about it. I really was.
Right.
because it wasn't like there was $1,000 stuff stolen or damaged or anything like that. But it's here and there. That's not really the point.
I thought they did go in and like destroy the house and it weren't supposed to be the. Yeah, see, it gets crazy. The story's going to
it needed to be cleaned up.
Right.
But there was a couple of small items that later that were stolen, but nothing. Yeah. Like the rings were not stolen; they were put back in the case. But here and there, it's a violation of those people's privacy. It was so there's none of that. That's all absolutely true.
Sure.
But what was interesting is when we did not arrest every kid, and we knew. Listen, hundreds of kids there. We knew.
Yeah, there's a bunch of locals.
We knew. Yeah, for sure. There's no crime there. If you get invited to a party, it's not a crime because you invited because you don't know whether it's there or not, right?
Right.
But that wasn't the issue. So when it didn't go the way people thought it was, somebody said, "Well, you know why? Because the sheriff's daughter was there." Now but I'm going to tell you this. But I'm going to tell you an interesting. Yeah. And this is sad but true. So my daughter was in the hospital at the time, and she was in very, very serious health situation. And so my wife, basically, we're at the hospital with her.
Wow.
And people are saying, and there was a shooting that night. For those of you who don't remember this, there was actually a shooting that night. Walton County deputy got in a shootout. It was a shootout on the interstate. That's what I was there dealing with. And one of my younger daughter, who was there, the deputy actually came to the door because I was asleep, didn't wake up for the phone. Right. And she actually opened the door and let the deputy in. So as this evolved, as people started saying, well, wow, this is his daughter, and I can prove it. And my wife, it was, again, the first time she said, you drag, and I won't use the language, you drag her into court, and you put her in depot, this people saying, and you make them say they're lying. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, first of all, it costs $20,000. She goes, I'll spend $20,000. Wow. And she said, I don't care if you take it out back and pour gasoline on it and burn it, but you're going to do this.
Wow.
And I said, look, this is the worst thing we can do to chase this over this because we could go in there and say, here's hospital records.
Right.
I'm not doing that to my child. I'm just not doing that.
Right.
And she just my wife would not hear it. She wanted blood.
Right.
And it was to the point
because that's what her baby.
But from my standpoint, I knew it would make it work. It doesn't matter what the facts are.
Yeah.
And they want to hear your name in their mouth, and so you've got to leave it alone. But that's the biggest fight we've had in some years. That was my only real consternation with it. Otherwise, I didn't really care.
That as a dad, I think that would. I mean, I feel my blood boil when it's about it.
If she hadn't been in the hospital, we probably would have walked it off. My wife would have probably walked it off better.
Right.
But that was.
It's just like you don't even realize what we're dealing with.
And I'll be honest with you, to the point I could not take her if she'd ran into. There's two other people we knew them by name that said. Yeah. And she was good for. I know my wife. I know what she's good for. There's no way we could have been in public because it would have been. There'd been a crime committed. You know what's interesting is you're laughing. I'm not laughing because that's where she was at with it. And I said, we're not doing this.
Don't blame her.
We're not doing this.
No, I totally get it.
It was your daughter. I heard it was another county commissioner.
Then it became somebody else's daughter.
Yeah, it was county commissioner.
The conspiracy.
By the way, that part of it's actually true. It's the way these things happen. That person called me and said, "Hey, my daughter's daughter there," but they confused the two. They thought it was my right. Yeah, so they confused and went from that. But by the way, there was nothing wrong with that kid being there.
No.
She was about. They called us to go to their party.
There was advertised
so
for
we
2
were having.
weeks.
That's right. So we had people calling us going, but that's such a nut. We literally had an officer-involved shootout. We shot the suspect. 25 rounds were fired at deputies, shot them. That's what I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. So trust me, the other one
was pulled over on I-10 or something?
Yeah, it was a robbery here. That got pulled over. They shot with the deputies, and it happened on I-10. I was out all night with that.
Oh, okay.
Sheriff, what do you say to because the Walton County residents here? Look, so we got social media, we got the news. Yep. News travels fast. We have some shootings happening. We had the one in Sandestin. It was highly publicized. Sure. You guys, answered it immediately. The way crazy. You guys, the body cam on that, your press conference on that, the transparency with what happened was there. But we have some of those things happen. We had an incident just the other day, last night on holiday. Mm-hmm. I know you get all these things.
Made arrest on that today, by the way.
Yeah. Right. We know that. We saw that. We saw that guy was arrested. But we have all this thing happening here, and people. It's getting dangerous in Walton County.
It's actually less dangerous.
That's what I want you to speak to. Yes.
So somebody said that. Well, there's so much more violent crime now.
Right.
Dude, the crime rate is lower now than it was in the 90s.
Right.
However, when you have instances of violence, that becomes the most dominant thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at where what I would call our violent crime issue, when we have violent crimes. Mm-hmm. 100%, they're generally not from here.
Right.
There's either two things going on. They're mentally ill or they're not from here. and just about take it to. So the guys we arrested, he was arrested up. They were arrested up in Georgia for the holiday.
Cook, Georgia,
County. So we knew immediately. That's a kind of a great example. We could have got on the news. And said, we got all this stuff.
Yeah.
But we knew that we had them. Yeah. And we needed to be quiet long enough to get them.
Right.
And so there's that. That's
that full story, right?
It's a full story.
Wait till you get to the full story.
And by the way, that was a wait of whatever it is, 12 hours, and we've made an arrest, which is pretty good. But like the Sandestin shooter. From somewhere in Georgia shows up. That's
somewhere. It was in Georgia.
Warner
Robbins or something. It's like Warner Robbins or something.
We had a guy. We had a guy commit a mass shooting here in 2009. You may forget. It's literally right here.
Yes.
Shot 5 Chilean. The Chilean exchange students. People forget that. It's so those things are the high press, high public interest stories.
Social media.
So everything should be. I don't have any problem with that. But I actually can track the trends. I can tell you there's less burglaries now than there were in 2010.
And it's still, so you're saying Walton County is still safe?
It's not a little safe. It's one of the safest counties in the state of Florida.
And how many people have we added to this place in 15 years?
So our crime rate, we were given a national award by Radford University 2 years ago as the largest as a model management for reducing crime across 8 matrices.
Yeah.
I say this is the way it's done. You do it the Walton County way. But it's the converse between telling you it's safe, well, you don't need anybody, or is it safe because you have them? And that's one of the things we run into with the county. It's safe because we have the staff, we train them, we pay, and we do these things, right? You do away with that, it'll tick back up. So, it's always that balance how do you measure success?
Well, that's a hard thing. Sheriff, my previous life, I was second-generation garbage haul out of Atlanta. We actually had the largest family-owned sanitation company in the Southeast, and we sold it. But I can remember we had the city of Noonan, which is just south of Atlanta. We had all their garbage, pickup. And the mayor called me one day into his office and just read me the riot act for missing this lady. And I said, listen, let me show you something here. I said, one, we don't want to miss anybody.
Yeah.
And I really don't want her to call you. So we're going to get that corrected. But you've got 8,000 residents. I might miss 20 of them in a week.
I'm never going to make perfection.
I'm never going to hit perfection. And out of the 20 of them, 90% of those 20, so in other words, 1 or 2 we missed, the rest of them didn't put it out the night before.
Yeah, if you don't put it on your chest, how you going to put it out?
But I'll take the bill on it. I'll take the hit on it. Yeah. But we're we're really close to being perfect.
If you go, so the Florida Department of Law Enforcement keeps statistics on crime. Yeah. And you can look for the last 15 years. So, I'm very much a trust but verify. Just because I say it doesn't make it true.
Trust but verify.
You go look it up. Look it up, and you'll see that Walton County we are always at the top of that. And so we go to different. The reason why everybody really hates us, they hate it at my office, is we use it's a statistical validation tool that assigns manpower based on some algorithms.
Yeah.
And people hate it.
Yeah.
They hate it, but it works.
Is it effective? That's right.
It is incredibly. Listen, I got this national award for the top police executive in the country a few years ago.
Congratulations.
And guess what? That's not all of Mike.
Thank you,
by the way, I didn't really do anything. I just took this program and said, make it happen.
I'm going to make it work.
But you know what was great? What was interesting about it? We did it the first year. And it was working so well in 2015, 2016. I was like, man, this thing is working so well. Yeah. Well, we can make it better if we just change this, and we just change this. And we had a bounce back the next year or two. Oh, man, I was so aggravated. But I was like, and I kept, don't change anything. This doesn't really apply here. And, these are PhDs, and it doesn't apply here, but X, Y, Z. I'm like, no, that's not. So I went and found a chief deputy at the time I loved this guy. And I went and pulled him out of retirement. I said, listen, I need you to do something for me. I don't want you to read this. This is the program I use. I need you to make this work.
Yeah.
I don't want you to deviate. I want the trains to run on time.
Yeah.
This is not something we're going to allow innovate. Do this.
Right.
And he read it and he came and goes, he said, Sheriff, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how I feel about it. I said, can you make it? Can you follow these rules? He goes, yeah, I'll make it happen.
Yeah, baby.
And look, I love that guy. People see him coming down the hall. He was at work at 5:45, 6 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
And if you were down the hall, he'd tell you real quick, 8 o'clock, you're late. 7:30 you're early, 7:45 you're on time, 8 o'clock you're expected to be at the desk working.
Yeah.
And this is the way it's going to be.
Yep.
And the numbers immediately came back down.
Came right back down.
He goes, look, I don't know why it worked. He told me after, I can't figure out why this
What's
works.
the secret sauce?
What's the secret sauce?
Yeah.
I was like, look, it's trend analysis.
There's
basically trend analysis.
Consistency too, right?
There
just,
is an
just when you're following consistent, you're doing things, and you're. I mean, what I always said is that you got to, for business, you have to dive into every area of your business. You have to say what's right, what's wrong, how do we fix it, and then the thing nobody does is start back over. You've got to consistently do that all the time.
Data is agnostic.
100%.
You got to look at it.
That's
so
exactly
we
right.
have an accountability thing where we look at all. We empower you and give you the resource. I got to give you that, right?
Yeah.
I got to give you the resource to do it, and then I had to take my hand off of it. So that was another thing too, Sheriff. You can't go in there and play with it. The Sandestin shooter. I'm going to use that for example. That's an anomaly. You will never track that out. That is an anomaly.
Right.
But crime, believe it or not, tends to be cyclical and regional. So, for instance, I can tell you that there is going to be a set amount of shoplifting at Silver Sands, and guess what? It's going to happen between spring break and it's going to happen between summer. And guess what? Wednesday before noon is the busiest day of the week here. Wow. And there's more traffic crashes on Thursdays than there are any other time. It's not what you think it is, and the numbers don't lie.
The numbers don't lie.
The numbers don't lie.
Yeah. Numbers don't lie.
And so we had to stop people from going, well, I think we should do this.
Yeah.
What's
And
the
what I
data
always
say?
said to this, I always said to the guys this, if you didn't get a call for service, what's your plan for the day? And if your answer is to drive around, that doesn't work for me.
I have a plan.
So
good.
Yeah, but so again, they had
plan
working
every
with me.
day.
So
That's so good.
And I wish I could tell you I was a brilliant. I came out a lot, but I didn't.
Right.
I let really smart people do it. And I empowered them to do the job.
But that is part of this. Your secret sauce
It is the secret
you don't
sauce.
have to reinvent the wheel.
You don't have to.
But when you find something good, then execute on that.
Yeah, when Chief Brian, my chief deputy, he was a great example of he didn't understand the sauce and he didn't care.
Yeah.
What he cared is you're going to work.
What do you say where there's folks that would be like, well, we've had this happen and the sheriff doesn't want it out, or Walton County doesn't want anybody to know that there's shootings that have happened.
Because they don't want to hurt
the tourism or whatever.
Right?
I mean, what do you say to that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm not from, I actually think the opposite. I think we're super transparent. All this stuff is advertised. I mean, so we put it out on our social, I hate to say just social media because it doesn't take into account those people that follow, on radio and people that still read, some of the print media and whatnot.
People read?
Yeah, people read. Shocking. So I would say it's kind of the opposite because I can't think of anything that here's where they get wrapped around the axle is we don't put everything out because there's not the blotter sheet. We don't put and by the way, I don't agree with the mugshots. So just from my standpoint, I do not believe that first of all, because you're not convicted.
Yeah.
If there's not an imminent threat, I've seen it ruin people's
almost
lives.
like the social media perp walk or something.
I do not
once that
like
picture's out there, you're in the public
there.
opinion, you are convicted.
And listen, I just.
Yeah,
I don't believe it. I mean, I do it because I comply with Florida law in regard to this.
Well, yeah, because Florida law has like very open.
Oh, it's
Why do we do it? Does it help?
It sounds good, right? Because no,
but it doesn't help.
It doesn't help. I don't think you should see autopsy pictures. I don't think you should see crime scene pictures.
I tend to agree with you on that.
I don't want to see that either.
About that.
Yeah, I tend to agree
people
with
do
you.
for their own joy and edification.
Yeah, I don't want to see. You remember when they had that guy that was beheaded in Iraq, and that went all like it. Like
who wants to see that?
I don't want to see that.
That is crazy.
People
you don't, but there's people that do.
But
right?
people that
and
do.
they'll go and watch it. So, but it's not reasonable for us to print every arrest on our social media, and so if we don't do that. You literally would read nothing but arrest all day, every day. All day, every day, we arrest people.
Yeah, you'd have 20 mugshots a day.
Yeah, but so if it's not the one you wanted, it was hidden.
It was hidden, yeah.
So we just say, what's the level of public interest?
Yeah.
But if you look at the booking sheets every day, I mean, we arrest however many people a day. For sure.
Safest county. In one of the safest counties in Florida,
without question,
and this is still an incredible place to come and visit and play. Just treat it like
your home.
Your home.
It's my home's your home.
What's my home?
I'll say it again. I can live anywhere I want.
Yeah.
I don't have to live here.
You choose to be.
I choose to be. I chose to raise my children here.
It's kind of paradise, though. From people from the Midwest, first time I saw that water, I said, "How is this America?" Anyway, you don't all have to come here, but it is paradise.
Sheriff, we're getting to the end of the deal. We could sit here and talk with you for 2 more hours, but what I do want to say, what I do want to ask you one last question, and it's something I've started asking every guest probably in the last 9 or 10 episodes, we started asking every question. I love the different answers I get to it, but what would you tell your 25-year-old self now, knowing everything that you know? If you could go back, what would you tell your 25-year-old self?
So Samuel Beckett, if you guys are familiar with him, was the Irish poet, right? And he said, ever tried, ever failed, matters not. Try again, fail better. I was so obsessed with being better than other people that I did not take the chances I should have taken for an enrichment of my life more than just work. I thought I could outwork you, I could outthink you, I was going to be smarter than you were. And guess what? Nothing ever fundamentally changed in my life. Instead, I stopped worrying about myself and tried to make people around me better. And I was a guy that made my bones by, if I made you look bad, I hated it for you. Work harder. In my chosen area. Yeah. And I was fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
I was fundamentally wrong. And that's why I don't get so wrapped around the axle when we have deputies or firefighters or detention that make mistakes. I try to give a little bit of grace in that. Yeah. As long as what you're not doing is illegal, unethical, or immoral, okay, you messed up. We're going to spank you. Let's go forward and do whatever we're going to do.
Don't lie, cheat, or steal. That's what I used to tell my people.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't lie, cheat, or steal, and I'll trust you.
Those things, I try to be more open to accepting and that was something I just simply could not wrap my mind around when I was younger, and it was I was wrong, and I missed opportunities to have a fuller life.
Yeah,
because I didn't do that. I'm glad that I did not go into business, and I'll tell you why. Because the gamifying of that, and I have kind of an obsessive personality, and so the metrics would have been X, right, for whatever the metrics is, and it would not have been conducive to my type of personality, right? So and I'll tell you the great blessing for me, is I have a fear of God. And I always say, if you don't, even when I was acting like a heathen at my worst, my grandmother would send me these daily bread. Remember those daily devotions?
Yes.
My kids.
So I always knew that there were consequences for my behavior.
Sure.
Right? And that was the great check on something. Even when I was not living at the foot of the cross, I had that fear.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's an important thing. And so I wish I had also translated that into this idea of life experiences fail forward. So to me, that was, Beckett nailed it. I think he's right, and not just about work.
Failures, you're forged in fire,
It's okay to fail.
Yeah.
And then just do it.
That's where you learn.
Get up, learn, go forward.
Sheriff, you've had my vote.
Yeah.
You will continue to have my vote.
Likewise.
I am thankful for your service and your department.
Yeah. It's just fun.
And I really, really appreciate all the things you do to make this place that much better.
Absolutely.
Listen, you know what?
And your team does.
I appreciate you guys. Here's the truth. I don't do anything but good people and allow them to do their job.
That's exactly right.
It's just no more complex than that. To encourage them, provide them some direction, and set some vision and tenor, and then I'll let them do what they do.
And they doing it too. We appreciate it, man. Well, we appreciate it. This is the part I like to tell you. Listen up, kids. Listen up, kids. Life's a journey, and I say it all the time. And I hope that you've listened in on this part or this whole podcast and listened into someone that is decided to pour into people, and then allow them to go out and do really good things. And that's really where it's at. You can't always look inward. You've got to look outward.
Yeah, amen.
So, or don't. I mean, what the hell do I know?
What the hell do I know? I'm just JB, middle-aged dad with ADD. Candid combos, jokes so lame, jabronis pulling a poker face. Just a couple of dudes with ADD. What the hell do I know? With JB.